But Emma, it's just I just want to find out from yourself in terms of some common misconceptions about autism. Do you get any sort of misconceptions in your role, particularly the work that you've done and training? Have you come across any sort of misconceptions about people's perceptions about autism?
Gosh, lots, yes. Lots of different misconceptions. And I think that's partly because actually autism can be really complicated. There are lots of misconceptions around sort of the reasons why people might be autistic. So we do know that there is a strong genetic component, and there's been lots of research around that. But people often think, well, if it's about genetics, then it must be that one person has passed it on in terms of like one of the parents, or it's come from one side of the family. But actually, in terms of the genes involved in autism, there's still quite a lot that we don't know. So it's not the case that there's just one gene that's passed on. So some of the reasons might be linked to genetics, but they're quite complicated and not always as straightforward as saying, well, they've got it from this side of the family or from this person. So one of the big misconceptions is understanding about why people are autistic. And part of the reason why there's some misconceptions is that we do know, there's quite a lot we know. We know it's very strongly genetic, but there's still a lot of questions around other factors that might influence that. So there's still a lot of ongoing research about that. But one of the main things to say is that it is a genetic condition, but there are multiple genes involved in it. And so that's one of the things that people might be unsure about. You know, it's certainly not caused by things like parenting, or it's not caused, you know, people might have other theories around why people might be autistic, around, you know, eating certain foods, that sort of thing. But what we do know from lots of research is that it's a strongly genetic condition. And there's not a single individual behavior or characteristic that we can see and we can say, right, we've seen that, they can't be autistic. So when we do assessments, actually, one of the things that's really important is that we do a really detailed assessment and that we get a really good understanding about the presence of those different characteristics, what they look like in the person, whether we see them in different contexts, whether there might be other explanations as to why we're seeing those behaviours. So there aren't any sort of shortcuts and quick ways to do a good for autism, because we always have to think about the big picture and make sense of those things.
Thank you for that. And that was the question that I was going to ask, that I know we've talked about autism actually affects in terms of individuals' communication, interaction, some repetitive behaviors, but I was trying to find out in the simplest way and in practical way, what are we looking for? What are parents supposed to look out for so that they know this is being affected?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I suppose it's important to say from the outset that some of the behaviours that we might be interested in, you actually might see in the general population. So what I don't want to do is describe some behaviours and then for parents to think, oh, well, my child's done that, so that might mean they're autistic. Because there are kind of indicators that we might be interested in, but obviously if we identify those, that doesn't automatically mean they're autistic. It just means, let's understand a bit more and let's, go into a bit more detail. And it's a little bit unexpected in that not that many children in the general population will do that. And there are other behaviours where you think, well, we would expect to see some of these social communicative behaviours, but they don't seem to be there. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that the person is autistic. Okay, there's lots of reasons why we might see certain behaviours or not see other behaviours that aren't to do with autism. So when we do an assessment, we would notice those things, but we would do a really kind of in-depth assessment, which would also involve thinking, are there other explanations for this? So that might be, I don't know, if you've got a child who has difficulties with hearing, they may not be responding to you because they can't hear. So obviously you need to rule out certain things and think about, okay, are there other explanations before you would just say, okay, this must be autism.